We lived 43 years and between hope and disappointment. We are happy that we can close this chapter and that they are convicted. That is very important. It's more important than that they will go in jail.
That's the voice of Sonja Terlach, whose brother Hans was one of 4 Dutch journalists murdered by the Salvadoran army in March 1982, speaking to Al Jazeera. 3 top military officers were convicted in this emblematic war crime on June 3rd, marking the first conviction of high-ranking military officials in El Salvador for crimes committed during the Civil War. I'm Gressier, the editor of El Faro English. You're listening to our weekly podcast, Central America in Minutes.
In Nicaragua, the house arrest of Daniel Ortega's brother
relates more to El Salvador and Honduras than to Guatemala. In the case of Guatemala,
they say globalism comes to die at CPAC, but in El Salvador, it's already dead.
Central America in Minutes on El Faro English.
For their roles in plotting the ambush of the journalists traveling with FMLN guerrillas in Chalatenango, the former Minister of Defense, General José Guillermo Garcia, alongside former police colonel Francisco Antonio Moran and ex-brigadier commander Mario Reyes Mena, were sentenced to 15 years in prison, a sentence reduced from 30, citing ill health and old age. As our sister podcast in Spanish, El Resumen, noted last week, Garcia and Moran were both deported from the United States a decade ago. They're being held under police surveillance in a private hospital in San Salvador. Reyes Mena continues to live free, pending an extradition request approved this year from Salvadoran Supreme Court. The Attorney General's office has yet to make the formal request to the United States. Reyes Mena, who is also facing a civil lawsuit in the United States by the brother of one of the victims, was confronted in 2018 by Dutch documentary filmmakers on his doorstep in Virginia. Quote, "Journalists never tell the truth," he told the Zembla interviewers. "You're all part of a communist conspiracy, and after revenge in any way you can. Why should I have to talk about something that happened more than 30 years ago?" The sentencing has brought closure to the deaths of Icon TV reporters Koos Koster, Jan Kuiper, Hans Terlach, and Joop Willemsen, and may serve as hope for the thousands of survivors and victims from the conflict between the US-backed military and FMLN guerrillas, with open cases growing cold. In a joint statement, the Fundación Comunicándonos and the Salvadoran Association for Human Rights described the trial as, quote, "a historic precedent in the fight against impunity." The Supreme Court's vote to move forward with the extradition request is particularly striking given that the High Court has been tightly controlled by Nayib Bukele since 2021. Bukele promised early in his presidency to promote accountability for war crimes, even saying he would open classified military records. But he then backpedaled, and a judicial purge that same year led to the replacement of the judge of the El Mozote massacre case, in which General Garcia is the chief defendant. That case has not moved forward. In the case of the Dutch journalists, their families waited for over 4 decades for a verdict. Now, as the military leaders have been convicted, El Salvador is returning to a time of rising political violence against dissidents, human rights defenders, and journalists. When the military police were called out in May to quash a protest at Bukele's home, the increasing clout of the military and his regime was on full display. On Sunday, we'll release the second issue of Central America Monthly, our new digital magazine. If you appreciate journalism shining an unflinching light on Central America, go to support.elfaro.net and join our crowdfunding community today. In June 2023, in Honduras, 46 women died by fire and bullets in a massacre in Tamara prison. 7 months into a state of exception modeled on El Salvador, President Xiomara Castro ordered her own military police, a force implicated in human rights violations that she had promised to disband, to take control of the prisons in a campaign of, quote, pacification. She also announced plans to build a new mega prison on the Swan Islands, an archipelago protected as a national marine park. But those designs fell through when the government failed to find a contractor. As we reported in episode 5, the government has not quashed extortion, which it initially claimed was the reason to install the state of exception. Meanwhile, reports of an array of police and military crimes have increased. 2 years after the Támara massacre, in the middle of election season, the administration has turned the page, opening a maximum security wing. In a carceral PR campaign, they opened the doors to the press, promoting images of hundreds of men packed into 28 unventilated cells and pressed against steel bars. Sound familiar? Digital outlet Contracorriente called the new Supermax facility a CCOT replica, referring to Nayib Bukele's terrorist confinement center. Quote, its opening to the media appears to be part of an official strategy to project a heavy hand, despite the fact that the system was already under military control, they wrote. Human rights do not govern us, said Honduran General Fernando Muñoz, commander of the military police for public order, according to the outlet. Directly echoing the talking points of Bukele at the White House with Donald Trump, Muñoz added, quote, the rights of prisoners are not being violated, but rather the rights of 10 million Hondurans are being protected. In early May, Guatemalan Attorney General Consuelo Porras accused Luis Pacheco and Héctor Chaclán, two Maya Quiché leaders of the 2023 mass mobilization against an electoral coup, of terrorism and obstruction of justice. 2 days ago, an appellate court granted prosecutors' request to expand those charges to include illicit association. Luis Pacheco, who last year became Vice Minister of Energy and Mines, is the former president of the 48 cantons of Totonicapán, an indigenous municipal authority in the Highland Department of the same name. In 2023 and early 2024, the 48 cantons were a visible actor in a national dialogue between the government, civil society, the private sector, and the diplomatic corps to avert a coup. They were also a key motor of the protests, in which tens of thousands of Guatemalans called for the resignation of the Attorney General, as she was sanctioned internationally for attacking the electoral process. The charges have been condemned by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, who had met Pacheco during the 2023 electoral process. On Thursday, the EU placed visa sanctions and an asset freeze on the president and the legal representative of the Foundation Against Terrorism, key allies to the Attorney General. Brazenly, the expanded accusation comes days after the EU, Dutch, and German embassies visited the men, as well as publisher José Rubén Zamora in prison. Porras and allies are attacking the institutionality of the indigenous peoples, lawyer José Santos Sapón told El Faro English last month. Quote, they're in a hurry because obviously it will be Arévalo who will appoint the new Attorney General next year, he added. It's getting tough for them. All they need is the coup. Thank you for streaming our weekly podcast, Central American Minutes. I wrote today's episode with Edward Grattan, who's interning with El Faro English from the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY. Production and original soundtrack by Omnion. Be sure to subscribe and share wherever you do your streaming, and we'll be back next week. Hasta pronto.